Living Clean, Living Well is a presentation of the Canadian Centre for Abuse Awareness and is brought to you by Freedom from Addiction.
Welcome to Living Clean, Living Well, everyone. I'm your host, Teresa Cruz. It is Sunday night, and you're watching us live here on CTS Television. Really good to have you along. Treating the underlying issues of addiction. We've had many discussions about it over the past couple of years, and people seem to be of two minds. Do you treat the addiction first and then the underlying issues? Or do you treat them concurrently? How do you do this? Well, we're going to keep this conversation going as well, following up on what we talked about last week, which was about trauma. We had a lot of phone calls from you, and how you deal with it, how you get through it, and how to stay in recovery. So let's keep the conversation going. Tonight, I'd like to welcome to our show from Freedom from Addiction, we have Daniel Kahn and also Frank Mazzawi. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Daniel Kahn is an addictions and family coach. Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do? And I like that he calls himself a coach.
Thanks.
That's a good word.
It's a little bit different than a typical counselor or therapist, and I do work individually with people struggling with addictions or with other issues that they're looking to change in their lives. And I also work relationally with couples or with families as well, because I think anytime we're dealing with addictions, we're dealing with a whole bunch of different issues that could be happening with a family. Mm-hmm. So I tend to work in every different angle that I possibly can. And particularly, I have a special interest and I specialize a little bit in trauma work through a particular intervention that I use. So I try to bring many different ideas and thoughts in regards to how somebody might get into recovery.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And he's been on television before. In a former career, he was on Dr. Phil. That is so cool. What did you do?
Well, in a previous life, I was in the apparel industry.
Very good.
And so we got an opportunity to put a brand that I was involved with on that show. So it was a long time ago. It was really exciting. But I'm really excited about being here today and talking about addictions, because that's where my passion is today.
Absolutely. Did you meet Dr. Phil?
I did get to meet him and his wife.
He's a big, tall fellow, isn't he?
Huge guy.
Yeah.
Like a big teddy bear, though.
And was he nice?
Absolutely. Nice guy, down to earth, really easy to talk to, made it very comfortable to be there.
Yeah. As nice as Frank Mazzawi?
Just about as nice as Frank.
So Frank, your turn. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm an addictions counselor over at Freedom from Addictions. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this for a little while. I've been doing this for myself. I use a lot of my past experience in recovery. Spent a lot of time in Florida and moved back here. And I try to use the clients' positive sides, their benefit, what they're good at, what their assets, let's put it this
there
way,
you go. Yeah.
to benefit and help their flaws and whatever they need. And I try to just show a little more concern and love and empathy with the clients to help them. And that's.
I'm loving this angle of looking at the assets. You're taking the positives,
Yeah.
and then, like you said, working against the negatives. How do you dig the assets out? And I'm sure many are, at the time when you're talking to somebody, many are very prevalent, but imagine you dig a little deeper and find some other good assets.
Everybody's had something in their life that they've overcome. Any little detail, we can always find something in somebody that, there's a positive there.
Yeah.
Like, even in their lives of turmoil and trauma, there's always been those little moments of sunshine where we can expand that light and make it something bigger.
Awesome. You had a very interesting experience where you went down to the States and worked with a famous doctor.
So yeah, part of the training that I've done is in somatic experiencing, and I'm continuing my training. I'm in my third year of training with somatic experiencing, but I did get an opportunity to take some training with Dr. Peter Levine himself, which was absolutely amazing to do, to be able to hear from the person who created this trauma renegotiation process is really what he calls it.
For those of our viewers that aren't familiar with his work, can you tell us about his background?
So Dr. Levine was involved with NASA, with PTSD is where it all started. And really,
so that's post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
We were talking a lot about that last week.
Right, and that's a wide spectrum to deal with in itself. And what Dr. Levine created was a process called somatic experiencing to deal with some of that underlying issues, the traumas that people have experienced, in a very soft and gentle way, which would allow for a person to be comfortable in the change process. And so I'm really, it's something that I've experienced for myself in my own journey. So I'm biased to that type of treatment, but I see it work for so many people. And because it's a soft and gentle process, it really allows people to not be re-traumatized by whatever they're dealing with. And I think sometimes some of the processes can be just as damaging as some of the original events that occurred.
Yeah, there was a time when PTSD wasn't even recognized, right?
Right. It's something that people are afraid to even talk about. They don't want to think that they have trauma, or they look at themselves and they say, you know what, nothing's really happened in my life. Nothing's really traumatic. And yet when you start talking about it, kind of like what Frank was saying earlier in regards to dealing with resources that are positive versus negative, people always come in and they'll say, well, this is what's bad with me, or this is what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And it's just as important to start talking about the good things and the manageabilities that they have experienced, the positive things that they've accomplished in their lives in general, not just specifically to addictions, but in general. And that can support what happens moving forward with addictions recovery.
Let's move on to our phone lines now. Let's go to line 4. Marie's calling in from Hamilton. Hi there, Marie. You're live on our show. You're talking to the good folks from Freedom from Addiction tonight. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I'm really confused. I had a son, I got a son, I'm sorry, that went through the Renaissance program. He stayed sober for 3 months of alcohol and drugs. I was behind him 120%. I went to AA meetings with him, any counseling meetings. I stayed positive for him. He relapsed, and I was told by the counselor that to be expected, you know, because it's a 50-50 chance. Now I find out that he is drinking. I know he's drinking. I can't let my husband know, because then everything will all start back up again. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should just throw him out of the house. I don't know if I should tell my husband. I've already called the elephant out of the room, per se, like I was told. And Alan on. I'm just so confused. I can't trust him.
How old is he, Marie?
I don't know what to do. So if the family counselor can help me.
Of course. Marie, how old is your son?
He's 32.
32. Okay, Marie, let's turn it over to Daniel. Do you want to start in on this one?
Sure. I mean, you're in a difficult situation where somebody has gone and done some treatment, and now they've relapsed. And like you suggest, relapse is not something that we have to be afraid of. We don't want it to happen, obviously, but in this particular case, it seems like he's having some struggles. And I think the first thing that you need to do is get your husband on side with what's going on. You're going to need some support yourself in making these decisions. And doing it alone is just going to be probably difficult for you to do. So I think having your husband and yourself, and if there's other people within your family, generate some support mechanisms for all of you to make the right decisions for your son. That would be maybe your first step in really creating an environment that you're not alone in this. So I think that's a critical component. In terms of what you do with your son, you may have to look at some more treatment. You may have to look at what he's done after he's left the treatment process. Did he get into meetings? Has he done enough in terms of continuing the recovery journey? Because the initial treatment itself is just a starting point. It's what happens after the fact that's really important. So really evaluating what has been done, what hasn't worked, having some support mechanisms in place with your family, and having those conversations without him at first might be a good starting point for you.
I agree with Daniel. It's how you react to what happens. It's not what happens is the problem, it's what your reaction is to it. So it's sort of like the sail in the wind. You know, if you're sailing a boat, you got to figure out which way you're going to change the sail of the boat in order to take the direction to the direction you want the boat to go. So with your son, first of all, you got to take care of yourself, like Daniel said, and get some more support. And relapse is part of recovery. It could be. I know for myself personally, it happened a few times before I finally got the program right. And he may need some more treatment. I would suggest looking into other places or see what he did not get or what was missing. Find out what he did get, and let's build on what he did get from wherever he went. Where was it? Renaissance? Yeah. And go forward from there.
Is it good to go back to where you were getting your treatment, or try another approach, treatment, another center, maybe Freedom from Addiction?
Well, from my perspective, any treatment center is going to attempt to do what they possibly can to support somebody. At the end of the day, it's up to them to really make that commitment. In one way, it could be really good to go back to the same place because they have a file, they have a history with that person. In other ways, you look at it and didn't really get to where you wanted to get. So maybe having another look at a different facility, having somebody else maybe come in and do an assessment as to what's going on with your son might be supportive as well. But I really believe that the first step is for you to get your family, whether that's just your husband, involved with this decision-making process as to what has to happen next. Because going at it alone is just too difficult. And as we know, addictions are so difficult to get out of. It takes support, it takes the right type of help. And hopefully, you don't look at the last 3 months as being a complete failure and start working on what has worked. And he's probably got a little bit more understanding as to his own problems and issues. And hopefully he's willing to take another stab at it, either at the same place or at a different facility.
Marie mentioned that she's going, what do I do? Do I throw him out? Can you comment on that?
Yeah.
We can't make decisions for a family, but just from your own 2 cents, what would be your suggestion?
I mean, it's such a difficult question to answer. We
is,
get this
isn't it?
all the time in every situation where the family feels like they have to be loving and supportive, and yet they have to be strong enough to say, excuse me, we can't accept this behavior anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line. And that's why I think the support of the family itself is really going to be important. Sorry, to make that decision.
Yeah.
So that's what I would look for.
Yeah, Frank, what do you think?
Oh, I believe you got to lay down some boundaries, some rules, and it's just for your own health, first of all. We don't need more people becoming sick. Now, when it comes to whether to go back to the same treatment center or to go to a different one, I personally would think that it would be better if you went to a different one, because a new environment, different place, it just gives you that opportunity, especially if you went to, like you said, Freedom. It might be a little bit different than going back to the same place where people already know him, and he might actually be able to get away with more things. And if you come to a new place, at Freedom we have different counselors that attack you in different ways, and you might have a little more success there.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Marie, thanks so much for picking up the phone and calling us tonight. I'm really hoping that their opinions and their advice is going to help lead you and your son and your family down the right path, and that you can get some peace again in your life. We're here every Sunday, and we hope that we can hear from you again. Let us know how it's going. We're going to take our first break on Living Clean, Living Well, but when we come back, more from Daniel Kahn and Frank Mazawi from Freedom from Addiction.
It's scary to think that you're going to live the rest of your life without drugs and alcohol when it's all you've depended on. But there is hope. I knew I couldn't do it alone, and treatment allowed me the chance to ask for the help that I needed in order to believe that I could live a sober life. I got the help and support that I needed, and even now that I've left, I still have that support there.
Welcome back. So glad that you're watching tonight. We're glad to be with you. We're glad to be invited into your homes. Living Clean, Living Well is Canada's only live interactive television talk show that deals with addictions and substance abuse and trauma. So we're here, and we're really glad that you picked up the phone, Marie, and we're hoping that other people will call in tonight. These gentlemen have a wealth of experience with them, also through Freedom from Addiction, where they work, and they're just here to help. We keep it as an open forum, and we love to have you part of the discussion as well. Our toll-free lines are open right across Canada and into the States, so please give us a call tonight if you would like to talk. We are talking about generally anything that you would like to talk about pertaining to addictions and substance abuse. But we're also talking, we're carrying on from where we were last week about trauma and the effects that it has on the recovery process. We're also talking about, treating the underlying issues of addiction. And so, gentlemen, let's keep our conversation going. And as we talk about these various issues that we placed on the table tonight, let's talk a little bit about what Marie was talking about, and that is relapse, and how, you could hear it in her voice how upset she is that this has happened. I'm sure she's in absolute terror and fear, and it's scary for a family. What do you? Could we talk a little bit about relapse and if we lived in a perfect world, how people would handle it? Frank?
Well, it's scary for the family, but it's also scary for the individual too.
Sure.
I understand that it's a tough thing for the family to see, but on the individual, the shame, the guilt, the sense of failure, all this is falling on him, and this is what's stopping him from reaching out for help. All this is, it's just so hard.
Yeah.
Admitting that you need help again, but if the family just enables him and keeps going, he's not going to want to reach out for the help. So I think a lot of it falls on the individual himself. We're always talking about the family, and I just feel that we got to take a look at what the addict or the alcoholic is going through too, and it's really hard for them.
One of the things I like to talk about is when you have somebody who's early in recovery, is the ability to communicate. How is the communication happening between that person, their peer network? How is it happening with their family? How is it happening with their counselor? Is there that comfort where that person who's been fighting these challenges of addictions feels safe enough to be able to say, something's going wrong, I'm not feeling right, I'm scared. So that communication aspect is very, very important to me. And we try to talk about that at Freedom with some of the families. Yeah. What's it like for that communication to happen between different people? The other thing is the honesty factor. If I have somebody coming up and saying, I've relapsed and I'm scared, I'm much more comfortable in working with that person and saying, here, we have an opportunity to work with this person. The person who's going to run away and hide and trying to distance themselves from everything and not be open and honest, that's where I get a little bit more scared. So looking at relapse, looking at communication skills, you're looking at honesty with that particular person and setting it up really quickly with the individual can really support a smoother transition through maybe less significant relapses and short-term relapses and getting back into recovery.
Well done. Let's go back to our phone lines now. Line 4, calling in tonight from British Columbia is Winnie. Hi, Winnie. You're on our phone or on our show. Glad that you're on the phone tonight. Welcome. Go ahead. Have you got a question or a comment? Winnie, are you there?
Yes.
Hi, Winnie. Go ahead. You're live on our show.
Yes,
Go ahead. Winnie, honey, you can't watch the television and talk to us on the phone. There's a delay. So please, if you could turn down your television, I'll give you a chance here to ask your question. Are you with me right now?
Hello?
Hi, Winnie. Please go ahead, darling. You're live on our show.
Put the TV low.
Okay. I'm going to talk to my crew right now. Jeff, maybe we could take her down, take the phone line down. Maybe we'll explain to Winnie she's got to turn down her TV. It's a good thing for all of us to know. All of television is on a bit of a delay. We do it for safety reasons. We do it to protect the license of this station because you never know when things could happen. So what happens is that there is a delay from what you're seeing on television to what actually is going on in real time. So if you listen to us and watching us on the television, in order to talk to us and ask us a question, you have to turn the TV down, okay? So maybe I'll give it a shot here. Let's go back to Winnie now. Hi, Winnie, have I got you? Are you there? Hi, okay, well, we'll try for Winnie again later on. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about this Dr. Levine's work. Sure. We were talking about PTSD. We were talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, and I found out last week that it's a subject that not a lot of people were talking about, and now it's really up there, and it's being recognized, and people are dealing with it, right?
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about trauma as a whole, people can hear the word trauma and get traumatized by the word itself. They get afraid of the word trauma. They don't want to admit that things have been experienced in their lives. And So we want to look at trauma from two different ways. One is a shock trauma, so something that's very specific, something like a car accident or being trapped in a home that's under fire, or something like that. Something very specific, that would be a shock trauma. We also want to look at developmental trauma, and that would be something that somebody's experienced through their early childhood. And that could be either perceived or real. So a child who grows up in a family who thinks or feels like they haven't been cared for or nurtured versus the child who actually knows the parent was distant and never there, it's the same thing. Whether the child has perceived that neglect or some form of abuse, it's the same thing. So Dr. Levine's work kind of deals with that type of a traumatic situation where we can look at different events in a person's life and really support them in changing the way that particular event or those particular events impacts them today in their lives.
And how to deal with it, right?
And how to deal with it on a daily basis. So when you're living your life and you're experiencing different situations on a daily basis, am I stuck with everything that has happened to me my entire life? Or am I just dealing with it as a present day moment? And that's really what the work does. And so we look at it in really trying to get the person to look back into their experiences.
That could be dangerous, though.
Yeah, it's going at it very slowly. And very particularly with how we do it. And so that we're not re-traumatizing the experience, but we're able to look at it maybe from a different perspective or a different angle. And as we do the somatic experiencing process, we can support the person in kind of being more comfortable in that previous experience and allowing them to not be so overwhelmed by it anymore. That's really the key component. We can't change what has happened, but we can just make it different for that person to experience that particular trauma or those particular traumas in their lives.
Right.
And that's really what we're trying to do. And it's the same thing with addictions. When somebody's experienced a lot of trauma or what they perceive as been problematic parts of their lives, they can fall into a coping mechanism, and that can easily turn into an addiction because that's where they feel safe. That's where they feel alive again. So that's what we try to do, and we do some of this work at Freedom as well.
Yeah, and Frank, you work in that area as well?
Yes, I do. And sometimes the trauma leads a person to feeling uncomfortable, like Daniel was saying, and we end up self-medicating to feel comfort, to feel safety. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all trauma is going to lead to problems, because the human spirit is really resilient. There's a lot of people who have had traumas who've overcome them, which give us hope who've had trauma that we can overcome it in the future.
Right.
Yeah. So you're leading by example when you're working with them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Dr. Levine says trauma is a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. And really that's what it's about.
That's a good statement. Let's go back to our phone lines. We're going to try Winnie again. Winnie, let's go to line 4, and Winnie's calling in tonight from British Columbia. Winnie, can you hear me okay now?
Yes,
Hi, please go ahead. Do you have a question or a comment for Daniel or Frank tonight?
yes. I have a granddaughter who is 25-year-old, and she's really addicted to drugs and prescription medication. And I'm just wondering how I can help her. And
Okay, let's turn it over. Gentlemen, who would like to take this first talk with Winnie?
I would like to say, have you done any communication with her? Have you talked to her? Have you expressed how you feel? Have you showed her any interest in getting her help? Does she know? Because she's probably not a mind reader, and therefore you need to express to her how you feel, and perhaps express that you're willing to get her some help in some form of counseling, some treatment, whatever it takes. But you need to have some communication with her.
Have you talked to her, Winnie?
yes, I have talked to her. I have prayed for her.
Yeah.
I have done everything to help her, but she's very stubborn, and she has gone to the Bethel Church in California for a year. And after she was doing okay, and then after she came back and she got caught back in the wrong crowd.
Daniel?
And really, there's the answer, right? It's the same thing with the first caller from earlier is what happens after a person gets into some form of recovery. That's not the end of the road. That's the starting point of the road. Is there aftercare involved? Is there continuing counseling? Is there a recovery program through mutual aid and through self-help? Those are all the things that a person needs to continue doing in terms of staying in recovery. with your, is it your granddaughter? Is that what I heard?
Granddaughter, yep.
Does she want help? Really, that's the first question. Is she looking for help? I'm hearing you when you say she's stubborn, and she may say she's got it under control or it's not a problem. And that's really typical with addictions, is the individual may not want help. They think everything is fine. They're loving their life the way it is. And us from the outside is looking at it going, how is this possible? How can this person think that everything's okay? So there may come a time when, Winnie, you have to have an intervention of some kind. You may have to set some boundaries for your granddaughter and say, hey, I'm willing to support you in a recovery path, and I'll do whatever I can to support you on that journey, but not to continue down this road that she's going on. And you're going to have to set up some of those boundaries that you think are appropriate that will support her in that process.
Thank you very much. Winnie, all the best to you with your granddaughter. And I'm going to get some resources for you, Winnie. If you would like to look into our website tomorrow, maybe tomorrow afternoon, please go to abusehurts.com, find our logo of Living Clean, Living Well, and double click on that with a computer. If you don't have one, maybe a friend does. And I'm going to get you some resources on there for your granddaughter in British Columbia, okay? So that's abusehurts.com, and then click on our logo. Let's go now to line 2, and Linda's calling in tonight from Brockville. Hi, Linda, you're live on our show tonight. Do you have a question or a comment?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yes, I have a daughter that's 25 coming, and I wanted to ask you a question about borderline personality disorder.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to know, like, she knows she has it. She's had it since she's been diagnosed with it, and she has a 2-year-old now. So she was recently living with me. I've been very supportive to the point of now I'm a little, I'm kind of exhausted, but I still, care for her deeply, and I want her to get help. But what happens if they don't, like I hear a lot of things that I just wanted to, sometimes too much research sometimes gets your mind boggled, but what happens if this is left untreated? Could she get some other type of disorder out of this, or was this something that maybe she could grow out of, or as the mind develops more?
Linda, I'm curious, has she developed an addiction, substance abuse, anything like that with this?
I was going to say she self-medicates now with pot.
Okay.
And I'm concerned because, that's something that she used to do as a teenager. Now she's, she's doing it again. And like I said, she's a single mom now who's got a small 2-year-old, and I'm quite concerned about my granddaughter.